Thank you so much for pushing play. This is MG Govia, Education Outreach Liaison for Okie 811, and you are listening to Digging Deep, our podcast. Hopefully, you didn't lose us during our little hiatus at the beginning of the year. We had a very busy couple of months with our expo and different events that was going to happen around the state, but we're back. And it happens to be May, happens to be the Mental Health Awareness Month. And I had a privilege of listening to my friend Jamie discuss mental health, especially within the oil and gas industry. And I really wanted an opportunity to share that with our listeners and just talk about how important that is. So Jamie, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and why I'm so lucky to get to talk with you today?
No, not at all. My name is Jamie Jones, and I am a licensed professional counselor. I have a private practice in Oklahoma City, and I also work for Canadian Valley Technology Center as their mental health support counselor. I've been in practice for about 8 years, and I find myself drawn to kind of male-dominated careers. So I work a lot with law enforcement. I work a lot with first responders and firefighters. Do a lot of trauma work, do a little bit of couples work also, but that's a little bit about what I do. And it is Mental Health Awareness Month. Mental health is important as it's ever been. COVID, as bad as I hate to say the word, I hate the C word, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Nobody wants to talk about it anymore, but it has really brought mental health to the forefront. And so we can't just shove it down under anymore. We've got to talk about it. So that's what this month is for. So hopefully we can do some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that for me, mental health has been something that's been talked about more and more, and you see it in more mainstream media. You see it in television shows. I'm a big fan of Ted Lasso, which that show has been bringing men's mental health to the forefront. So it's good to see that it's there, but I know that just because it's on Ted Lasso doesn't mean it's normal or a normal place in the office or in the workplace. So what are some tips? What are some ideas to normalize being aware of mental health?
I think I love Ted Lasso, by the way. Yes, yes, I love Ted Lasso.
Love that show.
And there are some shows and some outlets do it really well. And there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. There are a lot of TikTok therapists out there. There are just a lot of people getting mental health information from the wrong place or from someplace that isn't really very legitimate.
So how is it that we are going to normalize mental health awareness?
Well, the first thing we can do as individuals, one of the things that we can do is talk about it. I mean, that is the thing, talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, it goes to this place of shame, and it has all this shame built up around it. No one wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to mention that they see a therapist. But if you see a therapist, talk to your people about it. Just say, hey, I was going to the therapist the other day. Even if you just mention, I grabbed a donut when I was on the way to the therapist. At least it starts to normalize that conversation. So people go, oh, you see a therapist. What's that? Well, I've just got some things I want to work through, and I like to bounce these ideas off a therapist, or struggling a little bit with depression or anxiety, and that really helps me to kind of process all of that. That's the number one way we as individuals can normalize that. And then of course, I think with more companies, I'm so proud of my company, Canadian Valley Technology Center, because a year and a half ago, they decided we're going to make a position that's just mental health, just for mental health, which is what my position is. So I see all staff, faculty, students. I'm available to all of them on 3 campuses, which is huge to have a licensed counselor on staff available all the time. That's also something great that obviously companies can do. So
that is awesome. I know that the stigma with mental health, especially with men, it's like we want to compartmentalize, we want to be strong and tough and not discuss problems because we're supposed to be able to handle it. So we're working now in the office, we're telling people, hey, I see a therapist, we're trying to get it normalized. How do we break through those, toxic masculine industry and people like that? Because I know for me, I don't know if I'm a typical male, but there are some things that I know that I struggle with communicating feelings and what's going on with anxiety or things like that. So what are some safe space for guys, and how do we start getting that where we can go to see mental health professionals?
First of all, if I knew the total answer to that, I would write a book and be a millionaire.
Right. Understood.
That's that, you know, unfortunately, we have generations and generations and generations of this archaic type of mentality of guys don't seek help, guys don't need help, guys don't, you know, guys can handle it on their own. You've got to be tough, you got to be strong. And I would say about that being strong is actually going to see someone. Instead of being strong is I'm gonna stuff all of this and keep it inside and do all and, you know, let it affect my health and my physical health and my mental health and my family and all those people around me. Instead, being strong is actually making the call and going and finding someone that's a fit for you that works. So I think that breaking that, I wish I knew. I want to go back to more conversation. And how are we raising our young boys? So if you are a father or a mother of young boys, how are you teaching them, no, big boys don't cry and all of that kind of stuff? Or are you teaching them it's okay to feel feelings and it's okay to go through that and to feel it and be, you know, I mean, express it. Those are okay things. And I think that's where it's going to have to happen, is with, it's so entrenched in some of our generations that I don't know how much change we can affect there. But I do know that we can affect some change when we're talking about the younger generation. So I think that's probably our best bet on that.
Makes sense. One thing that you said in that is that your mental health can affect us physically. Can you kind of give me some examples of how those are correlated and how one affects the other?
Absolutely. Probably the prime example is that most heart attacks happen Sunday nights, Monday mornings. And what we know is that, you know, obviously weekends are less stressful than going to work during the week.
Better be.
Yes, they better be. If they aren't, something's wrong with your life. But and heart attacks, like that's a big thing. We're not talking about some little bitty thing. Yes, we know it affects our shoulders and we get tight and we get sore and all of those kind of stress can affect all of that, but it literally can stop your heart as well. So, and that's just some of the ways. Also, all kinds of gastrointestinal issues can happen with stress and anxiety, depression, all of those things. It's no longer a belief that what happens in your head stays in your head. It's just not that. But what happens in your head affects your entire body. We are one great big organism. And so we have to look at it that way, and we have to consider it that way, that, hey, I've got to get help for what's happening here because I don't know what it's doing to my body. I've had clients that will come in and say, my back hurts, it hurts all the time, I'm in such pain. And I'm like, let's look at where you've got trauma, because what we know now is trauma can get trapped in your body. So that's one of the first things, to me, that's one of the first symptoms, like when they come in and say, hey, I'm hurting all over. And all the doctors say there's nothing going on. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look. We've got something going on. There's something. And it's usually, it's something mental happening. A lot of times trauma. Yeah.
I know for me, personally, when I'm going through those bouts of anxiety and I'm struggling with processing something, is the sleep deprivation that I go through. Just the lack of sleep, and that affects so much. And yeah, I can tell you're ready to tell me a few
Absolutely.
more things.
I totally want to talk about sleep, because sleep is so important, and it's one of the things that we just tuck away as not important. It's so low on the priority list for so many people, but it is so important. It's interesting because I spent last evening with my daughter, who had spent the evening before with only 2 hours of sleep with her 4-month-old. And she was saying, I didn't think well at work. I wasn't processing well at work. I was foggy. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I get it. Like it's very difficult. Sleep is so important. And then, I mean, since I work with a lot of law enforcement officers and first responders, we all, and their crazy shift work, we're always talking about circadian rhythm and how that affects your mental health. But we know that if we don't get enough sleep, we make poorer decisions. We cannot think clearly often, and I mean, it's just all kinds of things. Sleep is very, very, very important. In addition to nutrition, we can talk about all the big things that nobody wants to talk about: sleep, nutrition, exercise, all of that. But those are all huge when it comes to mental health and physical health.
Right, exactly. And I mean, our audience, the tens and tens of listeners that we have, soon to be hundreds, we do have a lot who are in construction, who are safety professionals, who are going to be installing those pipelines or putting up that house. One thing that I stress in all my podcasts and presentations is we do this whole thing for their safety, and we can only do so much by marking lines or making sure their excavation is going to be safe. But if they're sleep deprived, they're making poor decisions, even though they've done everything right up until the day that they're on site, things can still happen. And that's why mental health is so important, just as important to safety as that hard hat. Right. So we want to be able to make sure that we're stressing that. And some of our listeners may be listening and going, wow, I wasn't really expecting a licensed counselor, but I think it is important when we look at the safety of our coworkers and our job sites. So the other day, when I was up at Autry Tech does a safety week each year. This year was their second week. They had you as a presenter, and you really gave us a lot of good information when it came to oil and gas industry. Is there anything that you would like to highlight or that you can recall from that presentation?
Well, one thing that concerns me a lot with the oil and gas industry is that it is listed as one of the top industries with who are at risk for mental issues. I wouldn't want to say illnesses, but in fact, even and all the way up through suicide. We have to talk about suicide, even though it's a heavy subject, obviously. But with about 6 million males in the United States that have depression, much of that undiagnosed, and much of that, I'm going to take a little rabbit trail. Much of that shows up as anger. So people think, oh, I'm not sad, I'm not sitting around, I'm not crying, I'm not this. But a lot of times depression can show up as anger in men. So that's something to look for, just side note. But a lot of the working conditions of oil and gas workers really set them up to have difficulty coping mentally in the real world. Some examples are certainly oil workers who go away, and work away from their home for 3 weeks out of the month, and they go 3 weeks and they're isolated. They have a very high responsibility type of a job, but they probably have not slept well, so they're probably experiencing a lot of workload, a heavy workload, and maybe even some unhealthy coping skills, right? So when we're out and we're alone, it's like maybe we're drinking a little bit too much, whatever. My guess also is if you're gone 3 weeks out of the month, that your relationship might not be on the best of terms, because it's difficult to do that. Yeah. So oil and gas industry is, and just by means of the working conditions and how high it becomes very high risk for developing mental issues and developing things like depression and even suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts.
Wow. It is a heavy topic, obviously, but when is it, as a coworker, as somebody who is around people, what signs can we look for that we're like, maybe they are having suicidal thoughts, maybe they are in a dark spot, and then how do I help them get help?
Okay, so isolation is a big one. Withdrawing from family, or or things that they used to love to do, don't do anymore. And now that's tricky, especially if you've worked away for 3 weeks and you come back, you don't want to do a bunch of things. You want to just rest. It's about rest. But loss of interest is a big one. Withdrawing from family or friends, feeling extra tired or fatigued, agitated and irritability, and especially with men, anger goes back to that anger. So often we're looking for sadness, and we think that that's what it's going to look like, and despondent and helpless and hopeless and all those things we know to look for in depression. But with men, so many times it's overlooked because there's this anger anger masks other feelings. So it's masking the sadness and that helplessness and hopelessness. And then even physical symptoms, even if they are developing more headaches or whatever, it's like even those things are things we need to look at and go, okay, what's going on with you, right? And that's one thing I would love to talk about, is how to talk about suicide with someone that you're concerned about. It's okay to just say, hey, what's going on? What's going on with you? And be that safe person that you can, that he can listen to, that he can speak to.
Yeah. Along those lines, I think one of the things I got out of your presentation was being forward and blunt and direct to this, because guys as a whole, we're not good at subtle clues. I mean, my ex-wife would be the first one to tell you that. I was terrible at it. Right. And so even with guys among guys, subtlety doesn't work, and especially with something so important as their mental health or maybe having those thoughts.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, anytime that you approach your buddy, you want to use an open-ended question that looks like, hey, what's going on in your world? I notice something's up with you. I can tell something, what's going on. Well, how's it, don't say, are you okay? And are you okay is okay sometimes, but are you okay? It's easy to say, yeah, I'm fine, right? I'm fine. We say that all the time when we're not fine, but instead saying, okay, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. Oh, nothing's going on. Yeah, tell me. I can tell that something's different. Talk to me. Just like that, just talk to me. So if then they start to talk about feeling helpless and hopeless, and it starts to sound like at all that you think that you have any inkling that they may be suicidal, then just ask the question directly. Do not say, now you wouldn't be thinking about hurting yourself, would you? No. You're going to say, hey, are you considering killing yourself? Have you had suicidal thoughts? Is that something that you're thinking about? And that direct question is going to get a very direct answer. And you're going to see it in their eyes as well. Like, I have to ask that question a lot as a therapist. But even if they say to me, no, I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. When was the last time you had suicidal thoughts?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, it was yesterday, but I'm okay today, or whatever, Right. So you have to just be very direct. And it's scary, and people are scared to death to do it, but that's the way that we're saving lives.
Outstanding. That is, like I said, that is a deep and heavy topic. Hopefully our listeners are taking that nugget of information. And when it comes to workplace, there's a lot going on. We've seen workplace hostility, violence, shootings, all these things, and all those things are centered around mental health. That's the thing that is the common thread, whether it's one of our friends or coworkers having these thoughts that put them into dark space, or us having a coworker who may be disgruntled and willing to use violence to take it out on everything. So we have to be aware of mental health and promote it with conversations, like you said, normalize it as best as we can to move it forward.
Can I say this? Mental health doesn't always look like it looks on TV, and getting help for mental health. So if you walk into a therapist's office that you don't vibe with at all, then you need to see somebody else. There are people that you can connect with. And there are tons of different kinds of therapists, all kinds of different therapists. But if you're not into, crystals and essential oils, get the heck out of there, right? Get the heck out of there and go find someone who talks your language, because that's what you need. The number one indicator of how successful counseling or therapy is that you have rapport with that counselor and with that therapist. So find somebody that matches with you. And there are people that match everyone. Like there's someone for everyone. If you need a straight talker, find a straight talker. Mm-hmm. And I find men like straight talkers mostly.
That makes sense. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's have one quick conversation about to put a bow on all this, how related to safety mental health is. I mean, obviously we're looking out for our coworkers, we're looking out for ourselves on the site, and we need to be doing everything we can to normalize mental health. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. But when it relates to safety, like I alluded to with, safety hats and stuff like that, how can we put an emphasis on companies to put this up there with benefits and time away from work and all that stuff to get it there? What can we do as workers going up to show the significance of mental health?
I think we keep yelling, we keep screaming, we keep saying we need it. And I think, luckily or fortunately, there is a trend towards mental health care in industry. So I love that. Obviously. I think also, one of the things I mentioned at the conference at OT Autry was that OSHA has some really great information about mental health out there and on their website. So hopefully we're moving in that direction. I would love to see industries make mental health a priority, not only just a priority, but also like make it completely safe to take time off work to go see a counselor. I have a friend just recently, and he was an air traffic controller, and I've been trying to talk to him to see a counselor. Finally, he said, I'm going to go see a counselor, but because of his work schedule, wasn't able to do that. And then he called me the other day and he said, I found out that my company allows me to take time off during the day. When I'm working night shift or day shift, they allow me to take time off during the day and go see a counselor. Nothing punitive, no punitive action, not taking.
Nice.
I love that. I mean, I was like, I love that. That's great. So I hope that we're kind of moving towards seeing how important it is for companies and industry, because what companies don't want is someone who's not mentally healthy on their staff. And I mean, do you want employees that aren't mentally healthy? That you don't, because it can cause all kinds of issues, not even that we've talked about before, right? So physical issues and all those kinds of things. So I don't know how we, other than just talk to them. I would love to see them have employee assistance programs that pay for some counseling. I know several companies that do. Several police departments around here have EAPs where they'll pay for like 8 sessions of counseling for their officers and their employees. Even if a company could even contract with a counselor, they don't have to do what my company did, where it hired me full time to do this, but they could even contract with a counselor where a counselor would be available if the need arose. And I love that, even again, training supervisors, what to look for with mental health issues, and how to be mental health literate, right? Okay. So even how to speak to employees and how to treat employees and how to notice when something's off with their employees. I would love to see that training across. And then additionally, I would love to see some peer training where we kind of watch out for each other. There's a lot of that in law enforcement. And I would love to see that in oil and gas. Love to see that move into other industries as well.
That would be fantastic. I know that a lot of companies go, well, HR, that's them. That's all they do is they are mental health professional, and not necessarily. I mean, they may be able to make sure my 401k is getting invested in, but
Right.
it may not know what I am mentally and what my needs are there. So I agree completely. Luckily, our company has EAP, and you and I talked about this briefly at the conference. Is I'm kind of a touch and go mental health person myself. I get back on track, whatever I'm processing, and then I'm like, I'll see you when I need you again. And it may not be the best, but at least I'm getting some help. And I
think I also admitted to you that I'm kind of that way too.
So I made me feel a little bit better about the whole situation. If one professional is doing it, then it must be the way. But I do want to stress this. So we'll wrap up this conversation, and I'll give you a final word as well. Listeners, mental health is important. I know the industries that the listeners are in, with construction, with pipeline, with oil and gas, and the others where long work hours and everything that's in there. I want you to realize how important it is. We care about your safety. If any of this conversation today made you think that maybe you need to seek some help or talk to somebody, please pursue that. If you just, I know that Jamie's going to give us some resources, I think, like phone numbers and stuff like that we can share with you as well. Take advantage of that. Your mental health, your well-being is the most important thing. So I hope that, again, if anything caught your attention today in this conversation, that you don't just stuff it down, you don't just compartmentalize it and forget it. Take action, care about yourself, and because we care about you as well. So Jamie, what are some resources for those who may need to seek some help?
Well, first I'll mention 988, and 988 is a hotline for, everybody thinks it's just a suicide hotline, and it is not just that. It's mental health in general. They can direct you and help guide you to some more resources. If you're looking for a therapist, a great place to look for a therapist is psychologytoday.com. And the good thing about that particular space is that it has little blurbs about each counselor. You can see their face. You can see what they specialize in. You can see how much it's going to cost you, what insurance they take. Let me say this. Insurances are required to take, and now maybe not completely, you may still have your copay, but don't not go seek mental health treatment because you think that it's going to cost too much. Because if you have insurance, your insurance should cover it, should cover a big bulk of it, especially, there are deductibles and all that kind of junk. But but you can, on Psychology Today, you can see the little blurb, you can see the person's face. A lot of times there's a little video, and so you can kind of see, is this person, I feel like I can kind of, can I build a rapport with this person or not? Can I jive with this person or not? So that's a really great place to look for. And 988 is not only for people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, but also if you know someone who's experiencing suicidal thoughts, there are tons of resources there. 211 is another really great number for all kinds of information. If you're just struggling in general with anything, right. 211 can direct you to all kinds of resources, whether it's paying the rent or it's finding a mental health provider. So it's also a good resource for you.
We want to ask you to subscribe to our podcast so that you can be the first to hear each new episode. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to follow the channel for not only our podcast, but also educational videos on Okie 811 services. Follow us on social media to know of upcoming educational events, such as Safety Days or our Expo, or to know the next time we may be hiring. Thank you for listening to Digging Deep, an Okie 811 podcast. After you subscribe, be sure to share.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You've been fantastic. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge when it comes to mental health and things to look for men-dominated industries, as well as just anybody. I hope, again, our listeners play this again if you need to. Make sure that we're all looking out for one another and we do what's best to keep each other safe and ourselves in a good spot mentally. So thank you so much for joining me, Jamie. If there's any other opportunity for us to partner up with conversations or get in front of other people, I look forward to working with you in that.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Awesome. To our listeners, thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of Digging Deep. Please make sure that you've liked us, that you're subscribed to us, that you're sharing this with others that may need this information. And I thank you for your continued support. Thank you, everybody.